Hey everybody, it's Andy with AJM Custom Computers and Deep Vault Gaming. In front of you, I have on the left our old gaming machine that we recently replaced, and on the left is our Windows XP gaming machine that, if you follow us on the Deep Vault Gaming channel, we've done a few live streams from it, and it's the machine we're playing Fallout 1 on. Currently, today we're going to do a little bit of an experiment. In the old gaming machine on the left, I've got a super big gaming CPU cooler, which it doesn't need anymore, being that I downgraded it to just a regular desktop workstation. It's not used for anything high CPU usage. So we're going to pull that out of that one, and we're going to drop it into the Windows XP gaming machine, along with the processor that I intended to put into it, the Core 2 Extreme processor, seen right here. We're going to pop that in. When I initially built the machine with its current CPU cooler, that processor at idle overheated. It reached the thermal cutoff quite regularly, shutting the machine off. I couldn't use it to game. Luckily, the board that I got for that build came with the CPU, so I popped that in, and that is what we've been playing on. So this experiment is going to see if it is an issue with the processor, if it keeps running hot because there's something wrong with the processor, or if the cheap Chinese knockoff CPU cooler that I got because it was cheap for the build actually doesn't have enough power to cool the processor. So we're going to start with the old Windows 10 gaming machine. We're going to pull that CPU cooler out. We're going to put the stock one back in, and then we will move on to disassembling the Windows XP machine, because I believe I have to fully disassemble it to swap out the backing plate and all that. So we're going to completely dismantle it, and this will give you your first-hand look of the internals of the machine as we rebuild it back up again. Something I intended to do initially with the video build, but didn't use the right camera. Right now I've found my old iPhone, and we're gonna give this a try and see how the video goes. So I'm gonna do some swapping and we'll get started. Alright, so I have rearranged. Right now in front of us we've got the old gaming machine, and here in my hand I have the stock CPU cooler for the Intel i5 Pro that's in there, and we're going to be swapping this in for the one that's in it. So let's get started by pulling the case apart and seeing how far apart we have to pull this to do the swap. Pull the side panels completely off, both front one and the rear one. Sometimes some of these cases have an access at the back panel, so you don't have to pull the motherboard completely out to change stuff. I don't remember if this one does or not. Alright, this one I have to be careful with. I have a fan plugged in somewhere. We're just going to lay this one down for the moment. And this one does have an access at the back. If you give me a second, I will bring you around to it. Kind of hard to see, but there's the access right here to the back plate that we're going to need to swap out. I do not believe the other Windows XP gaming machine has that one, but let us get this laid down so we can work on getting this stuff out of the case. Get the camera back up. Go. So I'm going to lay the case down now, and we'll continue on getting to work. Alright, now we got the case laid down, and in order to get that door fully off the way where the fan is plugged in, I have to pull the graphics card out. So I'm going to try to hold this and do all this at once. Let's see, you got the 2 screws right here. And the big screwdriver is too big, so we'll use our little screwdriver. To break these free. The trick is not to drop the screws down. I did that assembling it, and it was not fun to get back out. Alright, so that's one. Got one more. I always put all the screws in. Make sure everything's nice and tight. Alright, and let's see if I can get that screw without, nope, handy dandy pliers. Go. Okay, now we need to unplug the power card, and the little latch to release it is down under the card. Let's flip it down, and let's that screw for the card below it is also holding it. My fat fingers in there, we go. Now we should be able to, this was a tight squeeze to begin with. And we have our AMD Radeon RX 580 graphics card. I've got 2 of them, the other one's in the machine I use for streaming. This one did wonders. We'll set this off to the side. Now we've got a clearer view. Somewhat. This cable is plugged in down there. The cable out, and get the door out of the way. Alright. So if I remember correctly, when I put this CPU cooler in, I had loads of fun getting it in because it doesn't actually have screws, it's got little nuts that secure it in place. So don't know if I'll be able to hold the phone and do it, or if we have to take the whole board out. I actually think we have to take the whole board out of the machine because I am not going to be able to get back here to the other 2. Alright, so it looks like a full disassembly is in order. Fun. You'll get to see me disassemble and assemble 2 computers in this video. Alright. Leave that plugged in. Here's my USB 3 add-on card. And then we've got audio. Buzzer can stay in. USB. 2 USB 2 headers. Come out. Front panel connections can come out. 3 SATAs for the 2 hard drives, and this drive. I smashed that one up pretty well. Right, on this side we've got power, 94-pin power. We've got front fan. Trace this back to our RGB controller. It's plugged in to here. See if I can get this out. RGB controller goes to the Coolmaster cooler here. And we've got one power cable left, but well, maybe I can reach it. Just get that at the top. Maybe not. There we go. Alright, everything external has been disconnected. Now the fun part is getting the 2 screws that are going to be up here, the one in this corner, that one not so much, out of the board, but let's get the easy ones out first. That one. Up to that one. I may not have even put that corner one in when I built it, which I don't recommend not putting in a screw because these are all the grounding points. Alright, we've got 2 down here. Can't do it through the camera. We got the one right here. Got this upper corner one up here. I did put that one in. Yes, I see it. Hidden right down there. Alright. Screwdriver won't fit. Just get the screwdriver on it. And I tighten it down. Interesting. Not sure how I'm going to get that one out. Give me a second and I will figure it out. Alright, I had to get pretty creative to get the screw out. Now let the board out and get our screw out. Alright, now we can get a closer look at everything. As you can see, this cooler is basically the size of the board. But it did its job. It did what it was supposed to. And hopefully it will resolve all our issues with the Core 2 Extreme in the Windows XP gaming machine. So, I got all the cables unplugged. As you can see, oh, now I dropped the cables back in the way. There's a nut here, one here, and 2 on the other side that secure this to the backing plate. So what we're going to do is, to make life easy, I'm going to take our memory out so we have more room to get in there with the tools. I'm over with the graphics card. Alright, now I know this came with a specific tool for this. I don't remember where I put it. So I'm just going to use a pair of pliers and I'm going to loosen the nuts. Should have probably grabbed a flashlight to give you guys some light. See what I'm doing. But if you've dealt with these coolers before, you know what I'm doing. Now we will carefully take the CPU cooler off, flip it around, don't get to use thermal paste on anything. Alright, so now we're going to clean the thermal paste off of the processor and the bottom of the CPU cooler. And yes, size comparison wise, the cooler is pretty much the size of the board. Well, let me grab a rag to clean off the used thermal paste, and then we'll get into installing the stock CPU cooler, and we will get this machine back up together and give it a quick test before we move on to disassembling the other one. Alright, as you can see, I have cleaned the thermal paste off. Before we install the stock cooler again, we got to take the mounting bracket for this CPU cooler out. And I don't know if you can see, but really see, but it is an Intel Core i5 2400. It's a quad core. I forget what the speed is, but it's a pretty beefy. It's an older CPU, but it is a pretty beefy one for its time. It worked pretty well for a gaming machine. The only game it seemed to have issues playing, that I had issues playing, was Fallout 76, which isn't very surprising. But we will take these 4 mounting posts off. Gotta find a better way to mount the camera somewhere, especially with these tasks that tend to require 2 hands to do. What I'm going to do is I'm going to set the camera down and finish taking that backing plate off. You get the idea. Take the 4 of the stands off, and then the backing plate comes off the back, and then we'll get to installing the stock CPU cooler. Okay, we've got the backing plate out. We've got our stock CPU cooler that's going to go in. And this particular one has got little plastic clips that just snap into place. into the holes around the CPU. Before we do that, we gotta put a little dollop of thermal paste on. I'm running low, so I gotta be very cautious with how much I use so I have enough for the other one. Alright, that should be good. All you need is a little bit, usually centered, so when you press the CPU cooler in, it'll expand out. So then we make sure that our clips are in the unlock position and out, so that we can slide this into place. If our pins aren't out, it won't engage. Let's see, this particular one is being not disengaged, but it is. There we go. And we snap them into place carefully, not to break them. Alright, so with the one in place, what we're gonna do is we're gonna lock it so it stays. Lock that one. Lock that one. And lock that one. Leave this one locked in. And rotate in. Alright. As you can see, we are flush down to the board with the locking pins on all four corners. Next step is not to forget to plug in the CPU fan, and then carefully route the excess wiring out of the way so it doesn't interfere, get tangled in the fan. Alright, we'll snap our memory sticks back in. For this machine, I'm using the Corsair Vengeance. They are 1600 megahertz and 2 8 gig sticks to make up 16 gigs of memory in the machine. That's one. And two. Alright, now the board is ready to be assembled back into the case. All our cables and connections made again. Alright, let's try this vantage point for the reinstall. Pretty much the same as the uninstall. We'll be putting the board in, I'll be securing it in. And should be a lot easier to do now we don't have that giant CPU cooler that's taking up the entire board. So let's get started. First, we're going to carefully place our board back into the case. Making sure all our cables we need are out of the way and all our through holes are lined up. And then we will, one by one, put all our screws back in. I usually start with the middle one. That way it holds everything in place and makes it easier to get all the other screws in. For this particular board, there are 6 screws that hold it into place. 4 at the bottom and 2 at the top. Alright, as you can see, I've got all our cables connected. I did most of them off camera because it was just easier to do without blocking the camera. But we've got our front panel audio here, our two front USBs, our front panel hard drive light, power switch, reset switch, two hard drive cables. This one goes up to our DVD drive, main power, front fan, and then we've got the auxiliary CPU power here. So now we'll get to installing the graphics card and the USB 3. We'll make our final USB 3 connection, and we will be ready to set up and give it a test. Let's set the camera back up. So I'm going to go with installing the graphics card first, since it's up at the top, and then the USB one after it. Sure everything is lined up, and we should get a nice click when it slides into place. Well, this one doesn't click, but the latch is in, the card is secure. We will secure it with the two screws again. Do this without dropping a screw, which I just did. Maybe if we use a different screwdriver, we'll be able to get in better. One. And two. Next we'll reinstall our USB 3. Maybe. Everything in tight space. Gotta get everything lined up. There we go. That's right. We'll secure that one in with its screw. Okay. And then we will connect the USB 3 header to it, and then we will connect the GPU power, and there we go. Give everything another quick double check, make sure we didn't knock anything else loose. And what we will do now is I will set up a monitor, a keyboard and mouse, and we will do a quick power on test to make sure we boot. And then if we boot, we'll slap the sides back on, and we will be done with this one, and we'll move on to the disassembly of the Windows XP machine. Alright, don't mind my sketchy monitor setup. I had that monitor mounted on a VESA mount, and I swapped it out with another one, and I don't know what I did with the base. I can't find it, so I've got it propped up. We'll give this a quick power on test, and hopefully it'll boot and we will be good to go. PC itself powers on, that's a good sign. Screen comes up. We've got our MSI boot screen. Windows is loading. So far so good. Don't know if you can tell, but our CPU fan is spinning. Graphics card just kicked on. Front one's on because the blue LED is on. And we've got a login screen. There we go. Alright. And we have a desktop and a noisy fan. Alright, that appears to be our CPU power supply fan, because those are off. It may not like being on its side, but it powers up and it boots. So we will shut it down. Maybe. Alright, I am hoping that that just doesn't like being on its side. So we're going to put the two panels back on. We'll stand it up, we'll power it up again to make sure that that doesn't make noise. Alright, we'll start with the top panel here. This one's got the fan in it, so we gotta remember to reconnect it to the fan header. It's a lot easier to get to. Still kind of tight for my hand, so we'll use a pair of pliers to slide this into place. At least get it started. Oops. Okay, and then we will get the cable up and out of the way. Make sure it's out of the way of all the fans so it doesn't get sucked in. Put the two thumb screws back in. Stand it upright. Back door on. And readjust it and make sure we boot again and see if our noise is gone. Alright, front door fan's on. Our noise seems to be gone, but we got this far last time without noise, so. Alright. Nice blue LED light. I like how the graphics card light is also blue instead of green like some of them. Alright. We appear to be booted back on. And our noise appears to be gone, so the power supply did not like being on its side. And let's take a quick look at our performance. It's a 3.1 gigahertz with turbo boost up to 3.2, and everything appears to be good. So this transplant back to stock was successful. So we will move on to disassembly of the Windows XP machine. We'll be back in a few. Okay, we're going to start the same with this one by taking off both the front panel and the back panel so we can get to the inside. So we'll take out our trusty Phillips head screwdriver and undo the thumb screws. I usually don't put them finger tight. I use a screwdriver. That way, if anyone for some reason wants to break into the case, they won't be able to just loosen it with their thumbs. They'll actually have to put some effort into it. This will be a little more than just a swap around. I'm going to flip some fans around. Also, while we're in there, we're going to replace the processor, put the Core 2 Extreme back inside it, and I think that's it. I'm going to do that, flip the fans, but I believe it's going to require a full disassembly. Alright, we've got our panels off and doing a quick look. I don't think we'll have to do a full disassembly. Quick look on the inside is, we'll get a better look when I lay it on its side. But we have full access to the back. Perfect. There you don't have to take everything apart. So let's get this on its side and start. Alright, I'll give you. Alright, quick overview before we get started. Now that we got some light, our two EVGA GeForce 8800 GTS graphics cards, our Sound Blaster Audigy audio card, our cheap CPU cooler that we are going to be replacing. We've got 2 gigs of memory, which is more than enough that we need. 1000-watt power supply down here, and our 2 Western Digital Velociraptor 300 gigabyte 10,000 RPM drives. So we're going to get started with popping out that CPU cooler and lining up the backing plate for the new one and sliding that all in. This one's the same as the one that we just put into the other machine. It is thumb screws that you just pop up. It has a help with a little pocket screwdriver. Actually, I think we are going to have to pull the board to secure the screws. Now that I look at it. Even though we can access the back, in order for me to tighten all the screws around it, I gotta pull the board. So we'll start with pulling the graphics cards and the accessory cards and all that. Alright, now we'll work on disconnecting the front panel audio, the rear CPU fan. This may come out. Let's see. Our front panel switches. Another fan, USB 2 on the front, three SATA connectors, another fan, main power. Last but not least, alright, we'll grab that when we get some wiggle room with the board, because I can't get my fingers in there. So we're going to take the board screws out. Didn't get to see the assembly of this one, but you'll get to see the disassembly and the reassembly of it. go, we got the power out. Alright, we've got our screws out, so I'm gonna adjust everything, and when we come back I'll have the board out of the machine laying on our ESD mat, and we will get started on installing the new CPU cooler. Alright, so we got the board out. Now I'm gonna take the old CPU cooler off and we'll get started on setting up for the new one. Said sometimes it helps to have a little pocket screwdriver to help pop some of these clips. This one I had particular trouble with getting installed, so I expect to have issues getting it out. As it is, it looks like this CPU cooler just broke. Right. What the tape was for. Alright. Old CPU cooler is off. Now we'll clean off both this processor and the cooler of the old thermal paste, that way we don't get it everywhere. It's already started to solidify, which means this has definitely been running warmer than it should have been. Alright. Give this a quick. Alright. Now we're going to swap out this processor for the Core 2 Extreme. The one that's in there is a Intel Q6600 Core 2 Quad. It's a 2.4 gigahertz processor, and we'll be swapping it in with out for the processor I had initially intended, which is the, let's see, the Intel Core 2 Extreme. It's a 3 gigahertz processor, so it's a little bit faster. Be very careful, because that is a good working processor. This is a working, semi-good processor. I think it's good. It was purchased off of eBay along with all the other parts for this build, so it is questionable. More so with the overheating issue that I was having with it. Alright, now we will install the backing plate that we need to install for the CPU cooler. We'll tip this up. And we'll need to make a few adjustments. You completely over. Actually, we shouldn't have clearance issues because these are long. Alright. Alright, got our backing plate and standoffs installed. So now we're going to add, we'll just do a quick fit check first to make sure we don't run into any other issues before we have thermal paste, check fan direction. Usually on the fans there's a set of arrows that tell you the direction. These ones are set like so. Alright, take a closer look. It's a tight fit, but it looks like it will work. We're gonna have an issue with getting this top corner screw here back in, I believe, but we look good. So we'll add some more of our thermal paste. Again, just a pea-size drop in the middle. And now for the 4 bolts or nuts. This one's going to be interesting. We'll save that one. Let's get at least the other 3 on so it doesn't go anywhere. See if we can get in there with that trusty pair of pliers. Alright, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to tighten all these screws down and I will come back when they're all done. Alright, so I've got the new largest CPU cooler on. I moved the fan that was on this side over to this side. It's still pushing all the air out this way. I did that, one, because I've got room on this side. This is where initially it was. And two, I've got that case fan right here that I can also utilize to help pull all that air through. I also neatened up the cables and somewhat tucked them away. I've kept the RGB ones out because they go to the little controller that I can locate somewhere that I can potentially change the RGB of the fans and their sequence and that. Not really a big deal for me if I can't get to it, but I just want to set the cables out to where I can get to them in the future. So our next step now is to install it back in the motherboard, the case. Get the board into the case. Well, let me make a little room. And we'll get that case back up here on the table. Slide that way. A few things we're going to check on before we fully install the board is if any of these two of these three fans up here may interfere with that. We may have clearance issues, so we're going to do a quick test fit to see if we do. If we do, we'll pop those fans out. If not, they'll stay. And actually, I was going to swap. I think they are going in. You're all going in the right direction, so we don't need to swap the fans. They're all pulling the air out the top, which is what I want. This fan's pulling the air out the back, and the one in the front here is pulling fresh air in. So let's do the fit check and see if we're going to run into any issues. Doesn't look like we will, but I gotta make sure that the new fan cables aren't gonna interfere with the top fans. Not look like they will. Alright, all our fans move. It's a still a tight fit, but we will get started on reinstalling the screws and connecting all the power cables. Ones that are going to be tricky is this auxiliary power one here. We've actually got a little bit more room than I expected to have. And actually, if I pop this back fan out, I should have even more room. First things first is we're going to get this corner screw in. And of course my screwdriver is not magnetized. If you run into that problem, an easy fix to at least get the screw started is a bit of tape to the end of the screwdriver. Stick the screw on, it will hold it enough to get started until you can finish it. And let's put sure all our make sure we don't pinch any cables that we need underneath the board. And we'll put this bottom corner one in to get 2 corners of the board in. Let us wiggle this auxiliary power into place. Alright, we've got that in place with the little help of our trusty screwdriver. Work on putting more of these case screws in. Or the motherboard screws in, my bad. Once I get 2 corners in, it doesn't really matter what order you put the screws in. Some people have a specific pattern they like to follow. I like to get at least just 2 corners or a center in to kind of hold the board in place. That way it keeps, if you have a center, 2 centers or 2 corners, either work, that'll hold the board aligned to all your screw posts. And it'll make it that much easier to get all your screws back into place. And while I'm at it and I have access to it, I know this CMOS battery is dead because it doesn't hold settings. I will grab a new one and replace the battery. Alright, 2 more screws and we'll put our fan back. Maybe one more screw, because I don't think I can get to... I can't get to that last screw down in the corner. So, with all those screws back in, I'm going to go grab a new CMOS battery, and we'll work on getting some of these connections all together and get the cards back in, and we're nearly done. Alright, here's the final test. Everything's hooked up. We'll apply power and see if we boot. I'll make sure to adjust my BIOS time and settings since I got a new battery in. So we'll turn power supply on. And fingers crossed we boot. Interesting. Everything powers up. But we're not posting. We've got a postcode of FF. See what that is. Alright, I'm gonna have to look a little into this and see why we're not posting.